Okay, this was a lot easier when I just had to track daily. I would just daily just mess around with the power rankings, then go to bed at night and go, yeah, that looks good. But with them only playing in their own divisions, I can't anymore. I really can't. But I may have to start doing something like that because I've just spent the last hour going over numbers, poring over everything. And when I did it daily, it was actually a lot easier to keep up on everything. So I've been changing the divisional standings for power rankings daily. Those ones I do change where I'll go, yeah, this one's better than that one right now. But the league I've been leaving alone. And I think I need to start shifting that by the day as well. And there have been people over the years who've said, don't do it daily. And I understand that. However, it does make it easier for me on a Saturday night to already have it basically set up through the rest of the week's games. And then Saturday night I just do adjustments and then I'm good. So that preamble out of the way. Let's start with number 31. They went 0-3 this week. They are 7th in their division. They dropped 8 spots from last week. It is the Ottawa Senators. It was a miserable week for Ottawa. They scored a grand total of 3 goals. And so they're 31st. Number 30, going 0-2 this week. One of the many busy teams this week. There were a lot of teams that were busy this week. And that is the Detroit Red Wings. I know Detroit, the effort's there. The top end skill is not. So we're starting to see the results of that, which is they can't hold their own when they need to, and they can't get those big goals when they need them. And they are where they are right now. Their overall record is 2-5-2. Number 29, also in the Central, the Chicago Blackhawks. So Chicago had a decent week. Now, while Detroit falls 4 spots, Chicago moves up 2. They were 31 last week. They were 1-1-2 this week. So they won 1 out of 4 games this week. But the other teams lost all 4 games or all 3 games that they played. So Chicago makes a little bit of improvement. And these are 3 teams that we kind of expected to see at the back end. So there aren't really any surprises there. Number 28, looking at the 8th place team in the West on the overall standings, and that's Anaheim. Now, they're currently 3-4-2. They move up 2 spots from last week. Their record this week was 2-2. So, mild improvement, and then they got slaughtered by St. Louis, and they play St. Louis again tomorrow. I still have them last in their division. So this is what's restricting their movement up now, is where I have a team in their division will restrict where they move on the board, which is actually kind of a fun way of doing it. And yeah, maybe I continue this next year just using the traditional divisions, right? And then I can rank teams in their division. I could do this again next year, kind of, sort of. The thing is, you don't just play in your division, though. See, there you go. So number 27, at least we don't think they're going to just play in their division next year. We really don't know what's going to happen. Number 27, going to the Eastern Division, and it's the Rangers. Rough week for the Rangers. They went 1-2-1. They dropped 2 spots from last week. It has been a rough start. Now, they did get the overtime win. Lafreniere gets his first goal. There are positives if you're Chicago. There's just not a ton of positives, or Chicago. There's not a ton of positives if you're the Rangers. There's some there. I know there's positive for Chicago as well. But for me, the Rangers, yeah, this has been a disappointing start. And they've already kind of got themselves behind the 8 ball. And we'll see whether or not they can pull their way out of that. Number 26, dropping 2 spots from last week. They went 1-2 this week, so they had 1 win and 2 losses. And we're going back to the West, and it's the San Jose Sharks. So again, I'm trying to use classic logos here and there and just change it up every week, because why not? It's fun to do. I also want to make sure that their logos, you can see what they are when you're watching this on your phone, your computer, or your television set. But hey, number 26 for San Jose, it was not a fantastic week for them. 1-2, and that one loss against Colorado, that hurt. Although Colorado, they had a good week. Just saying, they had a good week. Number 25, dropping 5 spots from where they were last week. They went 1-2 this week, also in the West, and that's the Arizona Coyotes. So, for the West, things are drying up. Now, Arizona did win their last game, right? But they got shut out in previous games. They ran 148 minutes between goals. there are reasons to be concerned if you're a Coyotes fan. So they go 1-2 this week. They're 3-4-1 altogether. And like I said, they dropped 5 spots this week. They just got passed. This is what ends up happening. They're kind of sloshing around and they got passed. Also, going 1-2-1 this week, dropping 5 spots from last week, and that's the New Jersey Devils. So for New Jersey, they dropped down to 24. And here's where it gets interesting. So they're in the East, of course. So we had 7 teams that didn't qualify for the play-in round. Here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one, and here's one. So the teams that didn't qualify for the play-in round in August, a lot of them are still sitting in the bottom part of my power rankings. And we'll see how long the other ones that aren't at the bottom end up staying out, because it's not like any of them are climbing quickly or anything like that. Number 23, and climbing, not necessarily quickly, but they're climbing. And they had a good week. They went 3-0-1. And that's Buffalo. Now, we'll see whether or not, and I have them 6th in their division, we'll see whether or not Buffalo can continue that climb this coming week. Like I said, good week for them. They get the shootout win over New Jersey. And that to me, just, they're right next to New Jersey. It's not a coincidence. They're right next to each other on the board. It's hard to choose between the two right now for where they're at. But for Buffalo at 4-3-2, I'll have them at 6th in their division or 23rd on the overall board. So that's 3 teams in the East, 1 in the North, 3 in the West, 2 in the Central. Next up, it's another team in the West that had a rough week. They ended it out well enough. At 22, it's Calgary. I had expected, I don't know, Calgary had, like I said, it was a rough week. They ended up going 1-3 on the week. They're now 3-3-1 thanks to the win over Montreal, but they drop 8 spots. So while Buffalo moves up 5, Calgary drops 8 spots. You'll notice 5, 5, 5, and 6. So again, when I'm doing these rankings, I'm trying to make sure that it's something that makes sense, and I'm glad to see it's coming this way, because I didn't pay attention to who was where in the divisions, or that the divisions were somewhere higher than others. Okay. Anyways. All right. Number 21. And I get the feeling that they're going to get it together. They went 2-2 this week. They went up 1 spot, and that's Edmonton. And again, the win tonight, that felt important. To me, it keeps them ahead of Calgary. And at 4-6 overall, we'll see how things go for them. But I believe they have Ottawa coming up. Ottawa Senators here, coming off of 3 straight losses against Vancouver. We'll see what kind of fight they put up against an Oilers team that does need to get some wins. I would say the Oilers, if they could win their next 3 in a row, then we're back into a situation where they can relax just a little bit. But they do need to win some in a row, and they have to be able to win games against Ottawa and make up that gap that they've got between themselves and other teams in the division. Number 20. And we're going to the West on this one, and that's the Kings. The Kings with a 2-1 record this week. They actually move up 7 spots. They actually moved up pretty much more. They moved up more than anybody else, which is why I'm wearing Kings. They had a good week. They look good. And again, the 2-1 record, they go to 3-3-2, and they're in the mix in their division. As Minnesota had a rough week, if LA can keep this up, who knows? We could see them get into that number 4 spot. And as crazy as that might sound, I've been talking about this since before the season started. Peterson has been playing much better lately. I think Peterson's going to end up being the starter. And the Kings veterans have looked like they had 10 months off to rest up. Number 19, dropping 1 spot from last week. And that's Nashville. So Nashville, you're in the Central. The Nashville Predators, they this week went 2-2. They're 4-4 overall, and again, they're right around that mediocre middle spot. And the loss against Tampa tonight, the 4 goals in the second period, there wasn't anything I saw in that made me move them up or down, to be honest. It didn't change their ranking in the division and doesn't really affect their ranking here so much, but they're right around middle of the pack. We'll see how things turn out for them by the end of this season. Number 18. Actually, this is the fastest rising team on the board, and it makes sense that I'd have a blind spot here because Vancouver, what a rise. And what's really helped them is that win over Winnipeg. And here's why. They play 4 games this week. They allowed 4 goals in those 4 games this week in total. They needed to get their defense in order. Check. They needed to get their goaltending in order. Check. Pettersson needed to get going. Absolutely. Everything the Canucks needed to get going now is on a run. And we'll see when they play Montreal whether or not that is going to continue. So I have them at 18. I didn't push them any higher than that. And there is still the possibility that in the coming week or two, Vancouver finds themselves back down here. Calgary could come back. Edmonton absolutely has the manpower needed to go on a run themselves. But for Vancouver, it was a very good week, and they were dominant in all 4 games. And so I bumped them up to 18th. Number 17, in the same spot they were last week. Now, they went 2-0-1, but I still don't know with Florida. I legit have no idea how good Florida might be. Like, they went to overtime in that game against Detroit tonight, and it was a very evenly played game. So, did they play down to Detroit? Did Detroit play up to Florida? And now tomorrow, Florida's against Detroit again, and they have 2 wins against Chicago. So, yeah, I don't know how good Florida might be, and I'm still kind of waiting to see. I mean, the record's good. They've been beating the teams they should beat. They're still in the mix, and I have them 5th in their division right now, but again, I want to see them against Tampa. I want to see them against Carolina. I want to see them against Dallas, and then have a better idea of where they're at. Number 16, speaking of which, in the Central, they had a 2-0-1 week, and they moved up 5 spots this week, and that is Columbus. So Columbus, Central Division team, are now in the top 16. Like I said, they moved up 5 spots this week from where they were last week. And again, first few weeks of the season, we're going to see some pretty dramatic movement up and down in the power rankings. That's how it works. So yeah, Columbus, number 4 in their division, number 16 overall, and we'll see whether or not they can string together more wins. Again, this week they went 2-0-1. We'll see how it goes. They have Chicago again with the Chicago, right? Some of these teams are making it so that other teams have very kind of gaudy records early, and we're not quite sure what we're looking at. Number 15, dropping 6 spots from last week. 6. That's the Islanders. Now, I still think the Islanders can pull themselves out of this, but notice this. I've got them 15th on the board, which is top 16, but I have them 5th in the East. I have them ahead of Buffalo, New Jersey, and the Rangers. I have them ahead of teams that have a better record than they do. And again, this is where strength of division matters, and it's one of those things that we're going to have a hard time with this year because you don't play outside of your division. So for me, I think the Islanders are playing well enough to be in the top half. However, it also means I have them 5th in their division. So that's one of those things. And if they have another rough week like they did this week, where they went 0-3-1, if they do it again next week, then they're down in this region or even further down. But I still think they had a lot of chances tonight against Philadelphia. They lose it in overtime. I thought they had a half decent game. Could have gone either way. And Carter Hart kind of sort of stole it. So, anyways, yeah, they're at 15, and if they'd won that, they still would have been 15. Number 14, also dropping 6 spots from last week. They had a 1-3 week, and that's Minnesota. So Minnesota, we're in the West here. Minnesota is the team that LA is going to look at and say, we can beat Minnesota. They proved this week they can beat Minnesota. So for Minnesota, for the Wild, they need to get the split against Colorado. They need to show that they can threaten the top 3 teams in this division, because the top 3 teams in this division are excellent. The other 5, it's middling. We knew this before the season started, that the other 5 teams were all going to be fighting for that 4th playoff spot, and we might get a team finishing 4th here who would not be able to finish 4th in the other divisions. We knew this before the season started. So I have Minnesota 14th. We'll see if they have a good week this week coming up. Number 13, moving up 3 spots from last week. And I honestly went back and forth on Pittsburgh. So they move up 3 spots. They're up to 13th now. This week they go, 2-1-1. They lost the 2 games against Boston, but then they had the comeback victory tonight against the Rangers. And Pittsburgh, Looks like they probably end up being a playoff team. Losing Jim Rutherford hurts, absolutely, because it's a distraction off the ice and somewhat of a distraction on the ice too. But with Crosby, Malkin, and everybody else, and the fact they've fashioned a half-decent record while Malkin's had maybe 2 good games, it bodes well. It bodes well for the team. So that's number 13. Number 12, going back to the north, and it's Winnipeg. So Winnipeg with a tough loss tonight against the Vancouver Canucks. That's not something that normally happens. It's the first time that's happened in a very long time. And so the Jets take a bit of a hit. The Jets went 1-2 this week. So again, they win 1 out of 3. I dropped them down to number 12. They're 5-3 overall. I think they're still pretty good, but we're going to find out this week where they're at. There's a lot of teams that we're going to get a better view of things. Because again, I've been saying that once we get to about 10 games in for everybody, we'll have a better idea. The problem is we keep getting these shutdowns that delay teams getting to that 10th game. And that's problematic. Hopefully that stops happening. But Chicago canceled the practice today. And of course, Vegas is off for about a week's time in all likelihood. And Carolina was off and Dallas was off. And so this is how the season's going to go. But we should have a better idea once everybody's played the same amount of games where we're at. And I'm going to say 10 to 12 games, we should have a better idea. Also because teams are playing back-to-back against the same team, you could have 2 really good games against a mediocre team, right? All right. Next at 11, moving up 4 spots from last week, is Philly. So Philadelphia had a good week. Philadelphia ends up going 3-0 this week. And so I have them at 3rd in their division. And so it started well, got kind of shaky. Now it's pretty good again. So the Pennsylvania teams, as long as they're not playing Boston, things are really good. And we'll see if that remains a storyline for the year or what it does. But Philadelphia, pretty good week. And they get that win over the Islanders tonight. And it is nice to see that Carter Hart is getting them some victories that maybe other goaltenders in the past may not have been able to get them. Now they're getting them. Number 10. And thankfully, these guys are finally playing games. They went 3-1 this week, including a loss tonight. The loss tonight hurt. Dallas was going to be number 9, and then tonight happened, and they're number 10 because they got switched in their division. And so, tonight's game was kind of a rough one for Dallas, but that's going to happen. I'm not overly concerned. I don't think Dallas fans should be overly concerned with one game. I think that'd be crazy. And of course, they only had played 1 game when I rated them last week, and they move up 3 spots after they played 4 games this week. There's going to be a lot of teams playing 4 games in the upcoming week. Things get really busy now. And so 4 games a week is going to be standard from here for most teams in the league. And look for the injured list to grow, and look for the possibility that you get more on the COVID list as well as the injured list. And we are in undiscovered territory, and there's no telling how long this is going to go on for. So you just buckle yourself in and go for a ride. Number 9, also in the Central Division, moving up 3 spots. They were 2-0 this week, and that's Carolina. So Carolina moves up 3 spots overall. And yet, I think I had them 2nd in the division last week, and I have them 2nd in the division this week. So that's how it works, is that these teams both move up against the overall National Hockey League, and yet they stay in about the same spot in their division. This is why I'm doing the 1 through 31 as well as the divisional, because I thought, if I just do the divisional power rankings, things aren't going to change very much at all. So, and I've noticed other websites are using the overall too. They're not doing the divisional power rankings. So that's probably why. Number 8, going back to the East on this one. They went 2-0-1 this week. And for Boston, it was a pretty good week. And then Tuukka Rask can't beat Washington. It's not allowed. He's not allowed to beat Washington. And it showed again tonight. Oh, and Tuukka Rask's stats against Washington always have to be bad. It's not that he has bad games all the time against Washington. It's just by the end of the night you look and you go, wow, that's quite the save percentage you have there. Yep. That's what Washington does against Boston when it's Rask in net, and I don't know what kind of evil spell they have on Rask's game, but that's what happens. But other than that, Boston had a good week. They move up 2 spots. They're now in the top 8, and they got Pasta back tonight, so things are going to get better. Number 7, dropping 1 spot from last week, and they went 2-1 this week, and that's St. Louis. The big concern with St. Louis is the special teams. So I still have them 3rd in their division, but special teams are an issue. The power play is an issue, but I think it's going to round into form. The 6-1 win over Anaheim was nice. It didn't tell me whether or not the Blues are that good or the Ducks are that bad. My guess is probably yes. So it's probably a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. And so I've got the Blues in 7th. They got passed. This wasn't a matter of them not playing well. They just, there was a team that was 7th last week that moved up. Number 6, dropping 3 spots from last week, much for the same reason, really. Montreal. So Montreal drops to number 2 in the North. They dropped to number 6 on the overall board. There were some arguments about whether or not they should have been number 1 last week. Tonight they lose. They get shut out by the Calgary Flames, by Markstrom. Great game by Markstrom. And so that's their first regulation loss. So it was a 1-1 week for them. They had 1 win, 1 loss. They only played the 2 games, and they dropped 3 spots. But the good news is Vancouver's coming to town, so we'll see if they get to feast on the Canucks again, and if Toffoli goes out there and works his magic again. It's possible. Number 5, also going with the North. The top team in the North is Toronto. What's interesting is that's the old logo and that's the current logo. So this is the 1939-40 logo and that's the current one. So when they brought this one out and they said, oh, and we've got 13 of these to symbolize the 13 cups. And I'm like, yeah, it looks virtually identical to what you guys had in the 30s. So it's not really that different. But yeah, so Toronto right there, and Toronto number 1 in the North. And I've got them number 5 overall. Good week for Toronto. They go 3-0-1, and they stayed the same spot as they did last week. Last week they were number 5. This week the number 5, but they're now tops in the North. So they lost in overtime against Edmonton tonight. We'll see how this week goes for them, because again, there'll be naysayers here and there, but when you're 7-2-1, you're on a pretty good run. And Toronto right now looks like they're going to be the number 1 team in the North, and we'll see how that works out for them in the playoffs and where things go from them. Because keep in mind that for all the talk about, oh, Toronto loses in the first round, how many times have they had home ice advantage when they've lost in the first round? Out of the last 4 years, how many times have they actually had home ice advantage for a Game 7? And there I think is the unspoken part of the whole, oh, Toronto chokes. If you're the road team in Game 7, you're not the choking team. You might have a problem getting out of round 1, yes, but if the home team in Game 7 is constantly losing, then you have an argument. Number 4, and moving up 3 spots from last week. So it was a very good week for Washington. Minus Ovechkin, no problem. They go 3-0-1 this week. They are still undefeated in regulation, and they're the only team in the National Hockey League that can say that. They do have 3 of the so-called loser points, but they currently have 15 points, and the Capitals are really hitting their stride, and Vanacek looks fantastic. Vanacek is playing very, very well, and so I have the Capitals at number 1 in their division. I have them at number 4 overall. Number 3, dropping 1 spot from last week. They went 1-0-1 this week, and now they're off for a while, and that's the Vegas Golden Knights. I'll use this one here, and this one right here. So Vegas is number 2 in their division in my power rankings, number 3 overall. And again, they'll be off for the next probably week. So next week they might end up behind Washington, maybe end up behind Toronto without playing a game. That's possible. If these teams have really good weeks, I'm not just going to hold that spot for Vegas because they didn't play. They can get past even when they're not necessarily playing, because part of it is then their schedule's really squashed, right? So there you go. Number 2, dropping 1 spot from last week. They went 1-0-1 this week as well. They only played 2 games, as because games are canceled or postponed, suspended, and that's what's causing all the chaos with the schedule. But yeah, Tampa Bay. They dropped to number 2. They had a good week. They took care of Nashville tonight, who are number 6 in that division, in my eyes, which leaves only one team left, and they're in the West. And they move up 3 spots from last week. They went 3-1 this week, and to me, Colorado is back. Even the game Colorado lost, they were the dominant team. They were really good in that game. They just lost the game. So Colorado had 4 good games this week, and to me, they're the best team in the league right now. So that's where we're at. I have Colorado at number 1, and I do have the North Division as having the lowest rated first overall team. However, I have 5 and 6 are both out of the North. And yeah, there you go. So the power rankings are up, and the current playoff matchups, if they started today, Columbus would play Dallas in a 1-4 matchup in the Central. Florida would play Tampa in a 2-3 matchup. In the West, Colorado would play Minnesota. That's your 1-4. Vegas would play St. Louis. That's your 2-3. And in the East, Washington versus Pittsburgh. Who doesn't want to see that as your 1-4 matchup? Philadelphia, Boston is your 2-3. And then in the North, it's Toronto versus Winnipeg. That would be a high-flying, exciting series. And Montreal versus Vancouver. Right? So those are the playoff matchups right now. But there you go. And those will change from week to week as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And yeah, I need to be doing these nightly so that I'm not posting this well after midnight my time on the West Coast. All right. Thank you guys so much for all your support. End of another week. I will talk to you again soon.